The United States spends way too much money on military defense spending. We should be spending that money elsewhere. Is that the case? Yeah, let's talk about that.
Instead of focusing on winning arguments, we're teaching the basic fundamentals of sales and marketing and how we can use them to win in the world of politics, teaching you how to meet people where they're at on the issues they care about. Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show.
Well, hey there, folks. Welcome to another fun-filled episode of the Brian Nichols Show. I am, as always, your humble host, joining you from our lovely Cardio Miracle studios here in sunny Eastern Indiana. The Brian Nichols Show is powered by the best heart health supplement in the world, Cardio Miracle. So, if you want to learn how to lower your resting heart rate, lower your blood pressure while improving your pump at the gym, stick around. Talk about that. We'll talk about that. That is later in today's episode. Also, you can go ahead and check out Cardio Miracle by scanning that little QR code over my shoulder or heading to cardiomiracle.com/TBNS. But let's go on and discuss all things military spending. There is this sentiment that I see across all the different political camps, and that is we spend too much money, the United States, on military defense or offense, if you want to, look at it from that perspective. But is that the case? Let's go ahead and dig into that and more. Joining us here on the Brian Nichols Show is Agustin Forzani. Agustin, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hi, Brian. Thank you for having me, and it's great to be here.
Great to have you on the show, Agustin, and I'm looking forward to kind of digging through some of the narratives and then what the actual dollars and cents says, I guess, when you look at an actual spreadsheet. But how about this? Before we dig into all things American budget, do us a favor, introduce yourself here to the Brian Nichols Show audience, and why, Agustin, are you so focused on American military spending?
Well, yeah, I am Agustin Forzani. I am a professor of economics at the Catholic University in Argentina. And I am also a director of a family business here in Argentina. I focused on defense spending. I have studied these topics in my master's degree with my professor Chris Coyne from George Mason University, and I kind of really like to study these kind of things through like a classical liberal perspective, I would say.
There you go. Good stuff. Well, let's discuss this, right? Because I hear the narrative all the time, Agustin. America just spends way too much money on things that we shouldn't be spending our money on, which is true, right? But then it's always focused from a military budget expenditure standpoint. And I think there's a lot of reasons that those concerns are not off base. But to go towards the article you wrote over at the American Thinker, you start digging into the real costs of the defense budget. And some of the dollars and cents don't necessarily add up to the narrative that we see being presented when we start talking about where to cut spending, where to actually increase spending. As a libertarian, my heart quivers a little bit at the idea of increasing spending. We're almost $37 trillion in debt. And what's sad is that I can't even pick off the top of my head how much money we're in debt right now, because the number just keeps going up. I was on a congressional campaign back in 2012, and we were lamenting at like $12 trillion in debt. So obviously things haven't gotten better. And I don't think they will get better unless some things change. But Agustin, a lot of folks talk about defense spending and say, well, start here. We don't need the military industrial complex. We don't need to be doing this world policeman thing. As a matter of fact, should we not just come home, start to pull back, stop being the world's, bully pulpit, and let's just start focusing, on actual defense. That's at least the narrative I hear. Agustin, give us your perspective. Where is that wrong, and why is that the case?
Well, yeah, I would say that this is kind of a narrative that you can hear over there, and depend on the political party that you are asking, right? Because the reality is quite different, I would say. So I wrote actually this article because I started to see. I mean, at this time of the year, you start to see every time the fiscal, the budget for the Defense Department discussed in Congress. The Defense Department presents their budget every year around March, April, May, depends on the on the things that they have to present, but and Congress start discussing these things, and they approve or not the budget. And this time, I started to see that some Republican lawmakers were concerned that the Defense Department budget was almost the same as last year. And they started to see even it's not an increase considering inflation, so it's almost flat compared to last year budget. And then other lawmakers also were concerned that the defense to GDP, if you compare the defense spending to GDP, is quite low given historical standards. And you start to listen the threats that we have to fight overseas. The US has to fight overseas. Russia, Ukraine, the war over there, the war between Israel and Gaza, in Palestine, So you start hearing from the Republicans that we have to increase defense spending. But you have also the I would say the Trump administration. They don't want to be the police of the war, so that's good. But there is a contradiction over there, because when I started to analyze the numbers, I saw that that's true that the defense budget is almost the same as last year. But if you add also the provisions that the one big beautiful bill that was passed almost 2 months ago by the Trump administration, that bill has lots of spending for the Defense Department also.
And I would say that bill has a lot of spending just in general, but you're right. Yes, for the defense spending, yes.
That's right. But if we analyze what relates to defense, it also has $150 billion more added to the defense budget that was around 850 billion. So if you add both numbers, you will have almost $1 trillion for the defense department for 2026, and that's not a reduction actually. If you or not, it's not flat. It's actually more than 20% compared to last year. So that was kind of interesting to see what was the narrative, as you said, and what were the actual numbers. Well, I tried to put into perspective the numbers here in the article. I tried to be a bit objective as far as I can, because it's quite difficult. But I see there is not a reduction here. It's quite an increase.
Yeah. Well, let's maybe take two different perspectives here, right? Because from looking at it objective as just the dollars and cents, the black and white numbers, you're right. Like there is no real quote unquote increase. It's all relative. But I guess is the concern, and this is kind of where the other piece comes in, is the concern not so much the actual number, though it's big, but actually based on the overarching principle that we are just, by and large, just spending too much. So some folks might hear, Agustin, like, okay, well, relatively speaking, maybe it's less. It should be even more or less, because the belief is, and I don't think it's an unfounded belief, that a lot of the budget is just this kind of shell game, right? Where we will give all of our money to, this, well, not all of our money, just being hyperbolic here, but, we'll give money to Ukraine or to Israel or to name your favorite pet project across the world. And then they in turn will invest that money back in the United States in our military industrial complex. And then, they pay taxes, they create jobs, and just the cycle continues, right? It's like in the old movie, Chuck and Larry, I forget, it was Adam Sandler and the other guy that was in King of Queens. But it's a circle, right? It continues on and on and on. And a lot of folks see that and they say, well, I'm going to channel my inner Dwight D. Eisenhower. Beware the military industrial complex. And if there ever was an argument for government spending, not that we're going to make that today, but should we at least, try to focus on areas that are going to directly impact these citizens themselves, like social welfare, right? Let's give free healthcare. Let's give, all the handouts left and right. That's at least the argument I hear from some folks, or the other folks who just say, hey, we're in the poorhouse, stop spending money, right? So what's the kind of fine line there?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's difficult to I mean, I try in this article, I try to focus just in the defense spending, but it's right that if you analyze the other provisions, for example, in the Big Beautiful Bill, you have lots of spending for other things that yeah, I mean, at least in the defense spending analysis, at least to me, seems quite high, even compared to I mean historical standards. The other argument that I tried to make in the article is that some of these Republican lawmakers try to say defense spending compared to GDP is quite low, and that's true. That's true. If you do the math, it's just 3% compared to GDP, but it's not just the defense spending compared to GDP. What you have to analyze, the activities that the defense spending does. The different military operations that you have, and the how far the military reaches in, and it starts to affect the economy or the civil liberties that we have you have in the US, right? For example, what I tried to show in the article that is that even though defense spending relative to GDP decreased during the Cold War, it went from 9% to 6%. During that period, you had the creation of the CIA, which is an agency which is not that transparent, and you never
That
know.
transparent. They had their own black budget there that was like gazillions of dollars going to God
and
knows where.
You never know how far they can reach in the and the civil liberties that you end up giving in exchange of that. So it's not just the percentage of GDP that we are spending on military that is important. I try to make also the case by providing some numbers here about the operations that the Pentagon is doing right now. I mean, in the 90s, the Pentagon was doing different military operations in 40 countries. Right today, is doing activities in 80 countries.
90?
80.
Oh, 80. Well, still bad, but still.
So it's double than the 90s, even though you have a reduction in spending relative to GDP.
Well, could I play devil's advocate? Could that be because the technology has gotten so much more advanced? It makes it so it's more easy. Like, hey, we can go do surveillance over in Blanglistan, and nobody will know the difference.
That's right. But still, you have to be careful with giving your civil liberties just I mean, I closed the article actually with a quote from James Madison. If you don't check the military spending, you will end up giving in exchange your freedoms that you are fighting for. That you have to be careful with that. It's not just increase the military spending and doesn't matter. Another thing is that the U.S. special operations, which are different than the operations, they are special. In the 2009, the U.S. was doing special operations in 60 countries. Right now, is in 150.
Wow,
almost triple. So yeah, that could be true. We use drones and all of that, but still, and there is another thing that happens with this, you are more efficient, but you end up having a boomerang effect. I would recommend to anyone interested in this kind of topics to read. My professor Chris Coyne has different books about this. He's great with this stuff, but he has actually a book that talks about this, the boomerang effect that you end up having with the military spending, because, for example, in the US, there are certain cities, the local police in certain cities has tanks, military tanks, to fight, the crime in a city. It's it's insane. I mean,
Bloods and Crips, Augustine. Bloods and Crips.
I mean, you have to, and these tanks were used before, maybe in some, not, I don't know, Afghanistan or something. They became obsolete, and you end up having them back in your own country. It's a boomerang effect. That's crazy. I mean, that's why you have to be careful with military spending. That's right. You have lots of problems overseas. We have to be, you have to protect you have to be ready for, prepared for any conflict, but still it's not that you have free leeway. It's like, that's what I try to do in the article, basically.
Well, and you're hitting on something that we've seen in America, especially. And by the way, like, there's a lot of things that Trump's doing right now that I have definite questions over, right? I think there's a lot of folks who just assume that because I voted for him last election that I just, like, I'm full-throatedly a supporter of everything he does. No. Like right now, and we're seeing this overreaching, borderline overreaching, at least in DC. I'm not going to say it's overreaching, but if he goes to other cities where they're starting to bring, national or the federal forces to, that's definitely overreaching. Like DC, we have this whole, silly, like, it's like a home rule thing where they're technically under the umbrella of the federal government, but that's not a conversation for today. But with that being said, right, like, let's just fast forward 10 years. And let's say we have everybody's, worst case scenario, like a President Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or President Gavin Newsom, right? They could easily leverage some of the stuff that Trump's doing here today to make the argument, well, we need to do this too. And to your point, how are they doing it? They're doing it with not just the military, but they're able to take the militarized police forces of these respective areas and turn them into almost like full-fledged occupation zones. And that's terrifying. You're right. Like, I know it for every 4-year-old kid at the parade who's like, woohoo, a tank. Like, yeah, little Timmy, that's great. There's a tank until, it's fast forward 3 weeks and President AOC is rounding up the conservatives and libertarians, and all of a sudden you're at the receiving end of that tank, right? So I guess, like, to that extent, is this a real concern, right? And I'm saying this obviously a little tongue in cheek, but, like, is this a legitimate concern? Because in America, we all have this crazy thing called the Second Amendment, right? Where bring it on, right? I think of, the old movie Red Dawn. My dad was a big Red Dawn fan, and I had to watch Red Dawn at least once a month, it felt like. Probably not, as your kid, it just feels like every day it was Red Dawn Day. But I digress. But, like, with that in mind, we saw in that movie the thing that kind of kept America able to fight back is because we were all armed, right? So is this more of, like, doom and gloom, worst case scenarios, or is there historical precedence to see something like this happen in other countries? Kind of same church, different pew.
No, yeah, I share your concern, and I would say, I mean, yeah, you can argue no problem if in the future Ocasio-Cortez is the president and she wants to, use the tanks against the people, like the U.S., the Americans. The thing is, still, conflict is expensive. It's costly. To just to fight is quite costly. You have to avoid conflict as much as you can. And related to what you were saying about, you have to always think policies as if the opposite party is in charge, because That's true. If what happens if the in the future, Democrats want to use the same with the same argument, want to do the same, you will be against this. So in this, I am quite uh, following the David Hume, Hayek, and all of those classical liberals that used to say that you have to create a system in which even when the worst are in charge, the system prevails. The system is strong enough. So you don't want to have a dictatorship or something to still be America, to have Trump forever. No, that's not gonna happen. I mean, you can like Trump as much as you want, but that's not going to happen. You will have different parties, the Democrats and Republicans um, governing the U.S., and you will need checks and balances. That's Thomas Jefferson, Hamilton, and the founding fathers of the U.S. Thought the U.S. With these checks and balances to have, as I said, even when the worst are in power, the U.S. still prevails. So I share your concern, and that's not. I think we don't have to take this increase in military spending lightly, because you can have some boomerang effects, some problems in the future.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, my generation, we're all ready for the problems. Not really. I here. And how about this? Because you're an economist and I'm not. So I'm going to ask you, Augustine. Like you're looking at this holistically, which I really appreciate. Like so many folks just get laser focused on the military spending's bad, the welfare spending's bad, the spending to Israel's bad. Like you see this across the board, right? But let's ask you, the economist. Like what would you recommend as some type of prescription to America? Like we have to start somewhere, right? So what is that easiest, like the easiest fruit to pluck from a tree, to use a silly analogy, like, or metaphor, whatever one that is. But like what makes more sense? Like how would you, if you were given the keys to America, please, like help fix our economic situation, what would you do?
Well, at least, yeah, in what respects to defense spending, I will start being careful and reducing spending. I mean, in my opinion, is a lot. Defense spending is the highest spending that you have in all, if you analyze all the agencies. Um, and then, well, yeah, I will uh, put much more focus in the Dodge department, and start cutting spending where getting the government out of the economy in particular. But in, in my opinion, the US, I mean, you have a huge deficit, budget deficit right now, and
We're
it's
cooked. We're
it's
cooked. That's what you're saying.
no, but it's difficult to make this argument, because I was going to say the US doesn't have a defense, a spending problem. Well, it has, but if you compare to but if you compare to other countries, the developed countries like in Europe, you are much better. What the US has, in my opinion, is um,
A revenue problem.
no, you have a system in which is way quite easy to lobby the government to have a favor,
Uh,
and to create a company or whatever, and you have to pass through Congress to get a favor to have your company grow. And that's if you compare, I mean, for example, compare with the Nordic countries in the north of Europe, Finland and all of those. They don't have they have a huge spending. They have a lot of taxes and all of that, but their economy is quite easy to start a company, and to they don't have, they don't, you can lobby the government out there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Well, and
so
really quick, Augustine, I don't mean to interrupt, but like, is part of the ability for these other countries to have the same type of spending that we do, is that enabled by us in turn, because we do more or less play this world policeman role? So like we're taking on the role as like, the big protector for a lot of Europe versus, the big bad Soviets, which Russia,
that's
right?
yeah, that's right. That's right. You have a part of that. You have part of that, but still, the U.S. Compared to these other countries, is not spending a lot, but this has a huge lobby problem that you can easily manage the economy as you want politically. You cannot do that in the Europe, but you have a huge. I would love like a mix, no lobby the government and no spending.
Now let me ask you, why is it so much easier here versus over in those other, you mentioned the northern states that, or countries there, Norway,
Well,
Sweden, Finland.
that's a question that I made myself when I lived in the U.S. And a friend of mine told me that he thought that, and that maybe this is true, because you have a free speech is really important in the U.S. Free speech is the
Mm-hmm.
the First Amendment. So um, that's why you have to have the opportunity to talk, to speak with the government, to speak with your congressman. And maybe that's why the US created a system in which it's quite easy, to speak with your congressman and do as you please with the economy. Put me these tariffs and protect me. And give me all of these give me the provisions for me, and I will be Boeing and all of those aviation companies. I will build the F-51 and all the the jets for it's quite easy for them. As you said, this is the military industrial complex. Well, uh, maybe it's related to the free speech that you have in the US, but that's a problem that you have to also protect.
Yeah. Well, and I guess this kind of goes to, I'm putting you between a rock and a hard place. Like, what would we be able to do? Like, because we're not going to get rid of free speech, right? I mean, I know I'm going to fight back if that was the case. But we also like we do want to reduce our expenditures. So like, what would be, in your perspective, kind of the best solution there? Is it something where we're removing the government relationship with big business? Like, I'm just kind of spitballing here, but what would that look like?
Yeah, keep reducing spending and keep protecting avoid this lobbying of the government. There cannot be any company that arrange with the government to have benefits for itself and the cost spread over the whole economy. You cannot have that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to avoid that situation. If you have checks and balances and you have institutions that are strong enough, you can avoid that. As the founding fathers thought the US, but you have to pay attention on that. Don't look the to the other side.
Augustine, you gave me a lot to think about today, because it's one thing for us in the political world just to have these kind of knee-jerk hot takes, right? Like, oh, we gotta cut spending here. Oh, it's this person's fault, because we hear this all the time. And I think a lot of that is due to the fact that we are in this 24/7 news cycle. So it's almost like, yes, there are big issues, but these big issues kind of get watered down because we're constantly chasing the shiny object, right? I call this for my day job, I work in the world of sales in the tech space, and I call it shiny object syndrome. Whenever there's a brand new technology right now, AI, right? And everybody's like, how can we AI anything? And I'm like, hey, stop chasing the shiny object. I actually just did a podcast on my other show, the CX Without the BS show, entirely non-political. It's all contact center and customer experience stuff. But I talk about this. Like, there's AI and then there's HI, right? There's AI, artificial intelligence, and then there's HI, human intelligence. And it all leads to empowering the HE, which is the human experience. But I see so many folks who just try to replace the HI, the human part, with AI. And what they're doing is they're at the expense of the human experience, that HE, they end up like causing more unintended consequences. And I'm using this as the example because going back to our political discourse that we see in America, because we're constantly chasing the shiny objects, we never are really going back to basics. We're never really focusing on the things that are kind of like universal, right? Like at the end of the day, when I call in, going back to my contact center experience world, like if I call in and I was double charged for something I ordered, right? It's like $200 microphone, let's pretend. And I look at my invoice and I have a $400 bill. I'm like, I need to talk to somebody like now, right? So if I call in, I don't want to get stuck talking to an AI robot. I want to have that human to be able to actually help me like talk through things, show me they understand my concern, empathize with me, right? And there are these universal basic truths. You just want, as a human being, I want to be understood. I want to be heard. I want my concerns to be validated. And it almost feels like, going back to the world of politics, you'll see where I'm going somewhere, Augustine. Like going back to the world of politics, we are so focused on trying to offer prescriptions or chase the shiny object that's going to lead the headlines, get the most YouTube views, get the folks on X all riled up, which you don't really need to do too much to do that anymore over there nowadays. But like, is there just something we could do to kind of get back to basics? Like what would that look like? Just getting back to the fundamentals. And you're an economist, so what better person to ask? What are the fundamentals we got to get back to besides just cutting spending, getting rid of this, big business relationship with government? Like what are the basics?
Well, I am an economist, but I am trained in the classical liberal, and I prefer to say that I'm not considering myself a political economist, but I like political economy. I love political economy. And I would say you have to return, as you said, return to the basics. Well, the basic document that you have a wonderful document, which is a marvel of the world, the U.S. Constitution. Grab that article and you have all what you have to do right there. It's like all written there. Just follow the U.S. Constitution, and I would add, there is we have our founding father here in Argentina was Juan Bautista Alberdi, which was inspired by the U.S. founding fathers, and he used to say, you also have to have the Constitution written in the heart of the people, because you have to not only read the Constitution and know it, but live the Constitution. So return to the basics, return to the founding fathers, and if you want to make America great again, actually you have to go there. You have all there.
There you go. That's the call to action. And how about this? I'll do my little final thoughts here, Augustine, then I'll turn it over to you to bring us home. Everybody knows I love to really make things easy to understand. And I just was, as you were talking through things, getting back to basics, it reminded me of one of my daughter's favorite books. My daughter is 2.5. And that book is called Baker Maker. And the whole idea in Baker Maker is that you're following the story of little Naveen, who was in this like baking class. And he thinks he's the best baker in the whole wide world, right? He's going to make the best cakes because he's seen all the shows. He's read all the magazines. He's an expert. So Ms. Maple, the instructor, she gives the class the basic recipe. And Naveen, he's not listening, right? He goes through, he's going to make his cake better than good. It's going to make it great. It's going to be the best. And he's going to put in a little extra of this and a little extra of that. He's going to fill the pans up more than they have to be filled. He's going to do all these little things to make his cake taste even better. And when it comes out of the oven, guess what? His cake is burnt on the edges. It's still raw on the inside. He takes a bite. It tastes like dog crap. And he's like, what did I do wrong? What happened, right? And he goes back and he's like, what should I have done? And right there on the whiteboard, the basic recipe. So what does he do? He tries again and he follows the instructions as written, and the cake comes out and it's magnifique, right? So like the fact that Naveen was able to go back to basics and create the basic recipe cake. And even though it didn't have all the things he thought it needed to be great, it ended up being way better when he just went back to doing the things that we know work. And I say all that like there are things, to your point, Augustine, we know works. So let's stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Let's just go back and use the wheel. So I guess that's my final thoughts for today. Augustine, bring us home. What are your final thoughts? And what would you like the audience to take away from today's episode?
Well, yeah, that analogy is great. And I also would say, just let's try to be careful and pay attention with all of these, defense spending and government spending in general, because, the US has a problem out there. Let's return to basics, return to the founding father the documents. And yeah, just be careful with this idea of being, the police of the world. Because I would close with a quote that I have here from James Madison that in the article I bring, which is, "No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare." So that's true. You have to, if you want to preserve the freedom of the US, which is the freest country in the world, you cannot keep fighting wars overseas and keep increasing defense spending. So that's
here, here. Agustin Forzani, this has been a great conversation. And I can't believe we went almost 36 minutes without talking about Javier Milei, which I guess that means we're going to have you back on at some point. There you go. But no, with that being said, folks, if you got some value from today's episode, please do me a favor. Go ahead, give it a share. When you do, tag yours truly on X, Facebook, wherever, Instagram at B Nichols Liberty. As for the show, you can find us over on YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get your podcasts. I like Podcast Addict, but Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just do me a favor, wherever it is you watch or listen to the show, just hit that subscribe button. And by the way, we have over 1,000 episodes here in the archives. So if you want to go ahead, check out some awesome conversations with some awesome guests, economists, politicians, folks in the business world, folks in the education world. You go across the spectrum. We've had some amazing guests here, Augustine included. And then one final plug, if you got some value beyond sharing the episode, you want to support the show, you can either go ahead and do a one-time donation using our links at the show website, briannicholsshow.com, or support our sponsors like Cardio Miracle. I keep on hitting my microphone, like Cardio Miracle over my shoulder here. So head to briannicholsshow.com/heart or cardiomiracle.com/TBNS, whichever one's easier. They'll bring you to the same place. And with that being said, Augustine, if folks are listening today, they want to reach out to you and continue the conversation. What's the best area to do that? Email, social media? What do you got?
Well, yeah, I would say I am planning to write an article about the Argentine economy. So I will if you follow me, you will have the news out there. So you can follow me on X. It's Agustin Forzani, and or in LinkedIn. I post all my articles out there, and yeah.
Good stuff. Augustine, we'll make sure we include all those links in the show notes. And yes, folks, make sure you've hit that little notification bell because we're going to have Augustine back on next time to talk about Javier Milei. So you don't want to miss that. So make sure, again, you don't miss a single time a brand new episode goes live. Hit that notification bell. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and put a pin in today's conversation. With that being said, Brian Nichols signing off here on The Brian Nichols Show for Agustin Forzani. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.